We are here at the restaurant Owamni in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Owamni is something that we put together and we opened up 2 years ago in July of 21. It was slowed down a little bit because of the pandemic, but we did get the doors opened, and we've had lots of accolades. We won Best New Restaurant in the entire United States last year by the James Beard Foundation, which is a massive award for restaurants to win. But mostly it was just a proof of concept to showcase that it's possible to have a healthy focused, indigenous focused, decolonized restaurant where our philosophy was basically cutting out colonial ingredients. So we took away things like dairy and wheat flour and cane sugar and beef and pork and chicken, and just really focused on creating foods and recipes that really reflect land and spaces. So the majority of the foods will be really kind of a reflection of where we happen to be right now in the Great Lakes regions here in North America. But we also feature other recipes featuring other regions that could be anywhere in North America. It could be some places in Mexico, it could be up in Alaska, it could be the Pacific Northwest, it could be the East Coast, it could be the Southwest. But we just try to make sure that when we're creating recipes that it really feels like that. Our intentions are purchasing from indigenous food producers first, so we're able to bring in a lot of amazing indigenous food product from all over the nation. And we're able to just spend tens of thousands of dollars towards indigenous food production and really raising the demand up there. And again, like with the recipes we're doing, we're not trying to showcase traditional foods. We're looking at trying to showcase what it looks like to evolve indigenous foods into a modern day, and thinking about the intention that we have of moving it into the future.
Hands, please.
We also have in Minneapolis the Natives, which is our nonprofit, which is an acronym: North American Traditional Indigenous Food Systems, NATIFS. And at Natives, we have a public-facing entity called Indigenous Food Lab, which has the market space, a digital classroom to record a lot of indigenous-focused education and curriculum, and also a giant, large production kitchen to be able to do a lot of just food production work in general, but also a lot of just development. The nonprofit goal is to really be a regional center point to work directly with a lot of tribal community and just indigenous peoples around this region to help to develop more indigenous food businesses, more indigenous food operations. We just really want to become a support center to help see the curation of more healthy indigenous foods out there. And we can train, we can develop, we can write recipes, we can write menus, and we can bring people in and have them work with us and give them the education and skills needed to be able to do those kinds of operations. And we also really want to help develop more indigenous food businesses. So we set ourselves up to just do a lot of training and be a support center for people starting businesses to find out the hurdles that they might have, whether it's just simple business startup to finding funding and whatever it might take. So there's a lot of pieces that we're kind of working on with Natives of what we can do to become that food support system in this region. And then we also built ourselves to be replicable so we can move ourselves around eventually. And we're already working on opening up more indigenous food lab concepts in Bozeman, Montana, which will be the first one. And we're also looking at Anchorage, we're looking at Oahu in Hawaii, and we're looking at Rapid City, South Dakota.
The space that houses the Indigenous Food Lab is called the Midtown Global Market. It's a multicultural food hall. So you can get food from all over the place. There's tortas, there's curry, there's Cambodian and Thai, there's Venezuelan. There's just a whole bunch of fun stuff here. So it just seemed like a really great place because there's so much diversity here. It's really close to the native corridor of Minneapolis, and it's just a space where we feel really at home with all the diversity. This is our Indigenous Food Lab market space, where we just offer a whole bunch of indigenous food products, some health and wellness products, some cookbooks, some utensils, and just a place, even some game meat. We have like elk and venison and rabbit and duck. And it's just a place that we wanted to create so people in our community will have access to indigenous foods. We have different kinds of indigenous products all over the place with beans and rice and corns and maple, and we've just been curating a whole bunch of indigenous food products. We also have a lunch counter here. Our hopes and goals with this space is to replicate it and to use this model and get this model directly into some indigenous communities to create a lot of this food access. This is all through our nonprofit, so our hopes are with our nonprofit status, we might be able to subsidize a lot of these foods when we get them into some of the tribal communities. This is the Indigenous Food Lab. This is our main production kitchen. We do a lot of work out of here. We do a lot of corn production, so we make a lot of nixtamalized corn product. We make a lot of tortillas and masa, nixtamal or hominy, whichever you want to call it. We also just did a pilot project with a local company and made a whole bunch of indigenous baby food for a local nonprofit who grew out a bunch of heirloom squash, and we processed and packaged everything. And it's just also a place where we kind of house everything. So we have a lot of wholesale, we have a lot of big bags of corns and beans and wild rice and just products coming from indigenous food producers. So here at the Indigenous Food Lab, we actually moved into this space back in January of 2020 because we were looking for a space that had a large production facility, a classroom space. Originally, we were going to open up a nonprofit restaurant, but then the pandemic hit in early 2020. So we just kind of pivoted like a lot of people did, and we waited for a moment, but also where we are, we're just a few blocks north of where George Floyd was murdered. And during the social uprising that summer in 2020, this whole street got really ripped up from just so much destruction. So many of the buildings around us got completely burned down to the ground. So during that time period, in late May, early June, we started doing a lot of food relief out of this kitchen. For a while, we were doing 400 meals a week, sending most of the food directly to some of the homeless encampments that kind of spurred up all over the place that summer. And then as the winter came around, we started sending up to 10,000 meals a week to 9 out of 11 tribes across Minnesota. And always staying in the vein of what we did was making healthy indigenous food. So we made a lot of indigenous food bowls. We made a bunch of meals that people could freeze and reheat. We made a whole bunch of soups that people could utilize. And there was just a lot of amazing work that we did out of this little space. Through Indigenous Food Lab, we're going to be teaching a whole bunch of indigenous focused education, recording everything onto videos, and just making a big online vault of all sorts of indigenous knowledge, whether it's language, food preservation, culinary and cooking, gardening, seed saving, wild foods. It's just a place where we can have community classes. We can fit up to about 16 to 20 people max on the outside. But mostly what we're doing is we have a lot of video equipment in here. Everything that we do, every class that we teach will get recorded, edited, and put online so other people can have access to it anytime. So we're just going to be filling up our website with a whole bunch of indigenous education access. Each food lab that we replicate and reopen will have some kind of classroom studio to do a lot of that kind of work in that region. Some kind of market space to be able to offer to that community a place to purchase indigenous food product, and also just a distribution point to move indigenous foods around, whether it's for food relief or for wholesale or whatever it might be, and some kind of production kitchen. So we try to outfit the kitchens being really focused on what would really help get more indigenous foods out there and becoming a facility to help other people grow, get foods on the market, and just make a safe kitchen space to be able to process all those amazing foods and flavors. And as we create more of these extensions all over the place, we'll just be able to move a lot of food around back and forth from all these different regions. We'll be able to grow the offerings on our indigenous food market space. We'll be able to help create and develop a lot of other entrepreneurs, because our goal is to be a regional center point to work directly with tribal communities, help them to develop healthy food operations by being a training and development center, help indigenous entrepreneurs, whether they're like caterers or food truck operators or restaurateurs or food producers, and helping them through hurdles of starting their businesses and just being a support center. So those are some of the main goals, is just creating all these regional support centers that can move resources, move knowledge, and even move people around to be able to work in different regions.
Our main goals with everything is just creating access to indigenous foods and creating access to indigenous education. And we're doing all of that through all these models that all fit really well together. The restaurant runs as a for-profit, but is managed by the nonprofit, and everything that we set up, a lot of the food production that we have coming out of the nonprofit at the Food Lab is being produced there, but sold to the restaurant. So the restaurant's always pushing money into that direction. And we're just trying to create more of a circular, more sustainable nonprofit model. So we look at restaurants as places that can create a massive amount of cash flow, a massive amount of skills to be built by workers, a lot of job curation, and just a lot of movement of all these indigenous products that are coming through. We just really want to see a vision of one day where it's not so unusual to find a Native American restaurant out there. So you could travel across this nation and find Indigenous focused food businesses all over the place, but especially inside Indigenous communities where they need it the most. We see the restaurants as filling lots of particular gaps with the model that we're attempting to do. So our goal is to have more of these public food eateries in kind of high volume places. So here in Minneapolis, Wamini is a downtown space where there's a lot of foot traffic, and we're just in a big, we're something unusual and something that people really migrate towards, because we've been sold out since we opened its doors in 21, and it's been over 2 years now that we've just had no reservations because they're just gone every time. And it's moving a lot of money through there. So we see that as being a model that can work in other places, because if we open up a food lab in, say, downtown Anchorage, Alaska, a restaurant in that really high touristy area of downtown Anchorage could really generate a lot of cash flow. It could create a lot of jobs, and it could just move a lot of food product and bring in a lot of an awareness, especially in areas where tourisms are heavy and you typically don't get anything culturally relevant. Typically touristy places are culturally dead, and we just really want to offer spaces where we can showcase a really true perspective of the cultures of the land, of where people might happen to be vacationing or staying. So it's a really important model for us because it can make a lot of jobs, and we can create other food businesses in tribal communities, especially when there's a lot of unemployment, because we can create a space that does create jobs. We can keep it under the nonprofit to supplement it so it doesn't have to necessarily make a profit, but at least strive to break even, to make sure that it's doing something for that community, and ideally creating kitchens that can do a lot of catering and really good food work there. We are doing other things with the nonprofit also, just like working with the USDA, trying to do some videos on how to eat a little bit healthier, having conversations about how they can think about their food distribution completely differently, and the curation of the products that they utilize and who they're purchasing from, and trying to think about ways to ramp up more Indigenous food production to circulate back into Indigenous communities eventually. We're also working with some hospitals and some schools and helping to develop recipes and menus that can be utilized in those kind of commercial and even industrial style kitchens, and being able to make recipes that have very specific cost targets to keep everything flowing, but showcasing how we can make these recipes and menus utilizing foods from that particular region, utilizing the language of those regions to put on the food, and to really figure out ways to get healthy food into the mouths of a lot of students and a lot of people in the hospital systems, and even penitentiary. Hopefully in the future too, we can work on some of that food curation also. So there's a lot of pieces to this work that we're actively working towards, but our hopes again are to just spread out all across North America eventually, because we can be in regions and cities all over the place, and each one becoming a regional center point to help more food production, more movement of food products, and help to capture a lot of the Indigenous knowledge bases that are still there, and share a lot of Indigenous knowledge bases from all over the place, and just really create a system that builds more support for the future. We've been very proud of the team that we've built here, and that continues to help us grow. We've kept a lot of people on from day one. We probably have in the summer times upwards to 120 employees on at one time, and typically our situation is we have about 70% of our staff that identifies as Indigenous in one way or another. So we feel really proud about that situation, and we're going to continue to push for that, because it's unusual to find a Native restaurant as it is, and to find a restaurant staffed by largely Indigenous peoples. That's a huge win for this model that we're building.